preparing for a different event, and I got to thinking about what I value and what I will and what I won't give up. And I want to stick to material possessions. This is not your grandchild. This is not your peace of mind. This is what material things you will and won't give up. And first I framed it in terms of Quakers, simplicity. And then I thought of other groups I've been in who talked about detachment and attachment from things. And I found this morning when I was thinking about it, I found myself thinking about the line, which, if not Quaker, is Quaker friendly, about live simply, that others may simply live. I found that some of the things I am most attached to are very basic. One of mine is toilet paper.
Actually, it's exactly what I was going to say.
There's a book I read a couple of years ago called The Lonely Polygamist. I don't particularly recommend it. But the only thing that really offended me in the whole book was that one of the wives would stand outside the bathroom door and hand people 4 sheets of toilet paper. And that was the part of the book that was the most offensive to me, that you got 4 sheets of toilet paper. I think she was in charge of budget.
I unfortunately ordered the wrong toilet paper in my mind. And the last, so we have 12 rolls of the wrong toilet paper. So that's why I know how important toilet paper is to me.
We order the right toilet paper. We order a case. We get 54 rolls at a time.
Uh-huh.
You have to have good garage space if you order 54 rolls of toilet paper. What I wanted to start with was to give each of you a chance to think about what are the 3 things. What are 3 things that you're attached to, that you really want in your life? Now, I discover that I'm pretty clear on 1 and 2, but my 3rd thing changes. Number 2 is modern transportation. Cars and airplanes specifically. I'm attached to using those. But number 3 changes. Sometimes it's iced cold drinks. And sometimes it's air conditioning in Central Texas. But somebody else, what are 3 things that you really don't wish to live without? Again, if you can keep it to the material world, that helps.
I'll go. And some of these are expensive. I think number 1 and number 2 are pretty simple. That would be my Sorensen mandolin and my 1953 D18 guitar.
I can't hear you. Can you be a little louder?
My mandolin and my guitar would be number 1 and number 2. And sometimes that feels kind of bad in a way, but because they're expensive pieces, they're expensive instruments, and they're certainly not simple. They weren't simple to build, but they bring me enough joy that they would be the top 2.
Okay.
And I think number 3 depends on what is the thing, what are the 3 things? Is it the 3 things that I would grab first running out of the house? Is it the 3 things if we're in war? Are they the 3 things? It all depends but I think the 3rd thing to me would probably be the bicycle. Because I can go to the grocery store, I can get most anything, I don't need gasoline.
I asked someone how I could get this more specific, and they said, well, ask them what the 3 things they grabbed going out of the house and ahead of the hurricane would be. And no, mine don't fit on that list. Yours probably would. Anybody else? What are your 3 things?
I can't think of three things. I
Got
can
two?
think about 50. But the one thing would be the violin.
Okay.
I would grab that, no question. I mean, when they tell us in the airplane that we're not going to take out anything, I say, you got to be kidding. Of course, I'm going to grab the violin if the plane lands on water.
Mhm.
But there's a list of other, I mean, it's just endless. I like to be able to cook on my stove. I like air conditioning. I like the car. I don't know what the top ones are.
Okay. Liz said toilet paper hits her list as well.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of what else. I'm obviously not going to grab the computer as a writer. Everything's there, but the fact is that it's all on the cloud, so I don't have to worry about that. And it seems to me that some things are replaceable. I know Terry it would be instruments, definitely. And they're not replaceable because they're instruments he's been playing for a long time, and they're some, they're more than that, but that's talking about somebody else. I'm not sure. About heat in the wintertime. That would be hard. And I guess I'd really hate to give up modern transportation also, because it's important to me to go see family and friends. And, if I had to give up both cars and airplanes, well, you could use the train, but that's not very convenient.
Anybody from the Zoom side of things?
Erica's just getting on.
Are here.
Well,
Yeah.
having had to give them up during the snowpocalypse, I really do not want to give up electricity and plumbing. Plumbing and electricity are really kind of necessary in our households. We're not set up for going to the bathroom without plumbing, and we're not set up for anything else without electricity. Can't have a fridge, etc. Can't turn the lights on. But that feels to me more like modern conveniences than possessions. I don't have a personal relationship to my refrigerator. Any refrigerator would do. But, having a fridge seems really important to me. Maybe just a place to live, a safe place to live with doors and windows and a roof and plumbing, electricity.
Okay.
Some people confuse poverty and simplicity.
Right.
And then the blame of reducing your life is the morality blame is put on poor people who don't have enough already. So that should be avoided, in my opinion.
Could you say it again, please? I couldn't hear the front part.
The front part was some people confuse poverty and simplicity.
Right.
Hi, this is Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Louder, please.
I answered a little while ago, but I realized I have these new speakers, and when I plug them in, it disables my mic, so I don't think anyone
We
heard me.
didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Okay, well, I'll go now. If I were going to leave the house in a hurry, I would take these three things: my laptop, my bicycle, and I would throw all my medication in a backpack and take it too. That's it.
Okay. Does anybody else experience that their list changes when you put different conditions on it?
Yeah.
If you had to leave the house with it,
Yeah, because there's things that aren't portable.
the things that aren't portable, yeah.
I mean, the piano, I can't drag it out of the house
But
easily. Go ahead.
when it comes to having to leave the apartment or house in an emergency, the first thing that always comes to my mind is my photographs. Some of them go back a long way. Even got a couple of them taken by my father, as a matter of fact. So, and after that, probably the other things are things I'm not really terribly proud of liking so much, but I like my computer, my TV. It's yeah.
You know, I find I don't care that much about this particular phone or the particular computer computers that we have in the house, but I do care a lot about the internet. Yeah, so it's not a thing you can grab, but if the internet went away and the cloud went away, that would be a problem. Also, books. If you ever saw my side of our bedroom, it's I almost can't get into bed because of all these things piled up. That I read a little bit every night, and like I said, the piano can't be easily dragged, but. Yeah, those things, and then I built on my own over several years a greenhouse, so maybe I'm kind of attached to that. Later, after everyone's gone, I have an anecdote from about 120 years ago that I'll tell you about John D. Rockefeller Jr. I don't want to take it. I guess
The next step in this is, well, what makes you change your mind? Or when have you changed your mind?
Yeah.
And maybe your story fits.
I'm not sure it does, but it's
Go for it.
it's about possessions. So apparently, I got this from the autobiography of Mark Twain, and the way Mark Twain wrote his autobiography was very postmodern. Back when he did it, he must have been writing about 1905, 1907. And the way he would write would be he would just sort of get up each day, and what was on his mind, he would talk about it, and then that would remind him of something that had happened in his life. And so, so a lot of the times he was talking about the news stories of the day, which, since it was just the day-to-day news stories, it's stuff that we're not familiar with, like some horrible thing Theodore Roosevelt had done to some lady, come to visit him or something in his office. But but apparently, like today, they like to dig up dirt on celebrities and publish them, and people would laugh at them. And so the press had just gotten a hold of, so John D. Rockefeller Jr. taught an adult Sunday school class at their church. And they had transcripts of the Sunday school classes. And so the press was mining this for hilarious things that he had said or done. And so it came time to teach about the story, the parable, or the story that Jesus tells about the rich young man, comes to him and says, what must I do to, gain eternal life? And he says, well, sell everything you have, give it away, and follow me, And so John D. Rockefeller is trying to explain this. And he says, well, it's not about it's not just about that you have a lot of something, it's what's important to you. And he says, say, in my case, money isn't important to me. So that wouldn't be what I would have to give up. I would have to give up something else. So that was, anyway, apparently that was making the rounds in the press back then, and people were having a lot of fun with it. I thought, I think we can, in other words, I guess for me, the lesson is we can fool ourselves about what's important to us, pretty easily. So anyway.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I like what was said about confusing poverty and simplicity, because it makes me think, at what point, for example, if there was 5 things, there would be at least 1, maybe 2 more instruments that would be on my list, and there's a lot of monetary value in the instruments I have, and certainly it isn't simple, I suppose, to have those, but they bring joy. And at what point do they interfere with some simplicity? And I'm not sure there's an answer to that, because I'm not sure, again, it's tied to poverty or monetary value. If it's tied to greed, at that point, perhaps there's an issue with it. But I do have I'll try to keep a very, very funny story about it. When we moved into the house, my instruments were scattered in about three different rooms. They were in 3 different rooms. And then we had one room that was kind of a storage room. And I asked my wife, I said, I want to clean that room out and turn it into my studio. So I got it all clean. I said, you can't come in there until it's done. Because it's going to be a mess upstairs. And so a week or 2 later, I have everything done. Desk over here. I have a nice chair, a couple different things. And I have all my instruments now in one spot, which once she came in the room was the only thing that she could see. You have, and I won't say a number, that many instruments. And so, it does make you think, do I need all those? Why do I need all of those instruments? I'm not sure I do. But some of them bring me a lot of joy and a lot of fulfillment. So that's why at least 4 of them, along with my bicycle, will probably be on my list. I don't know if that makes sense, but it really struck me, the poverty and simplicity.
I would like to say that based on having heard your group play on October 2nd, it's not just that it brings you joy, it brings joy to everyone who hears you. Thank you.
Glenna, we're talking about what is hard, it would be hard for us to decide to give up in our lives in terms of material possessions. And the next part of that for me is, well, when have you changed your list in the past?
An experience of being a 31-year-old widow in a house that I knew I would not be able to maintain myself, and partly because it was in the wild. It had 2 wood stoves, and as it's heating, and I had a 2-year-old and wasn't. And so I made a move down to. I rented the house and made a move down to Cambridge to live with my friend Gail, and I took very little stuff with me because there was furniture there, so I didn't have to give up. In a sense, I didn't have to give up anything. But then I lived there for a few years and then moved to an apartment by myself. I lived with Gail for 4 years and moved to an apartment in the 5th year with my son. And then we moved out to Portland, Oregon. And when we moved out to Portland, Oregon, it was unreasonable for me to take anything except some dishes. And so I had to choose. And I chose my vacuum cleaner because I knew that would be expensive, and cleanliness is important to me. And I knew wherever I lived, I would need a vacuum cleaner and some dishes that were pretty precious to me. And I stored some things with my brother, and I stored some furniture with friends, with the promise that I might claim them back if I moved back to the East Coast, which I eventually did. But so I didn't have to give them up. You know, I knew where they were, and I felt pretty much that they would be well taken care of. But really, the dishes and the vacuum cleaner, and then a few books and some I didn't send any art at all, which is important. You know, I mean, art meaning the pictures that I could, but I had places I could store some. So I think that's an interesting. I always wondered about the choice of the vacuum cleaner. It seemed to be, well, part of it was the vacuum cleaner had been my first husband's vacuum cleaner, and I think he had gotten it from his parents, and it was an Electrolux, and I knew I couldn't replace it. So. Anyway, that just, but it also does show what one of my values.
Moving is definitely one of the occasions that requires dealing with this stuff. Anybody else? When have you had to change your list?
Losing your purse is an instant experience of knowing you can think of all of those things you bought that you really didn't need. I just want to be made whole again. So, you know, I can branch off from there.
My list has pretty much stayed the same most of my life, but the one change that happens to most of us, is when I got glasses, and I realized that is one thing that I want to take with me. My glasses. And that was a change, I guess, but brought on by circumstances, not by.
It may be that the life changes, like you say, moving, retirement, children moving, leaving the nest, those kinds of things, perhaps death of a family member, though all of those things may result in you attaching emotional value to something different than you had on your list before. I could see that happening.
Or it makes you realize the emotional attachment you have. Like,
yes.
So when my mom died, I guess that would have been 3 years ago. The whole family got together at her house because she died in November. So we got together as we normally would have for Christmas, New Year's holiday at her house, and we just went through things, right? And I was shocked by the things that weren't important to other people. So I ended up all these photographs. I remember looking at from my childhood, because there were maybe even photographs of our grandparents or our parents when they were young. And I was just shocked that my brothers and sisters and nephews and nieces didn't care, you know. So I took them home. So there you go. And two very old pieces of furniture, which by tradition were always handed down from mother to daughter in my mother's family. And my sister and my nieces didn't want them. She had already given them things, but the two that like one I was told come from Iowa, come to Iowa on a covered wagon, you know. I mean, they're old, they were really precious old things in the family and gone back 200 years. And so, so they left Iowa in the back of a Prius. But, you know, but it was sort of, you're right, like these life changes make you, or make you realize attachments you didn't know you'd always had, you know.
Oscar Wilde, at a certain point in his life, was taken away his books. And he said, when you take the books away from somebody, you destroy the person. In other words, there are certain items and forms that are appropriate for a decent life. Instead, what we are hearing over the media is that terrible fallacy that we are doing good because you can find somebody else who is doing worse than you.
This is pretty much the rest of the discussion. If you were to decide that you needed to change your priorities for what you keep, or if you decide you need to communicate to someone else to think about their priorities, how would you go about it? Having them move is one possibility, one possibility.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you say a little bit more?
Okay, if you or I were to decide that we need to change our priorities on what we possess, or in my case, transportation isn't necessarily something I possess, it's something I buy into. How should I address that in myself? Or if you think you need to enable my addressing that, how would you do so?
I would say if something has value to someone else as well as yourself, and now for some reason it was coming off of my list, okay, then certainly I should offer that item or possession to the person who also has value. And I mean, I can think of examples of that, you know, but again, that's maybe different from running out of a house on fire where you don't have a time to make that decision, you know, other than throwing it out the second story window or something.
Right.
But, I mean, if it is moving or cleaning up, certainly, I mean, you know, you think of yard sales or things like that, the things that I might attach value to, they need to perhaps be offered to someone else who might also find value in them, rather than put them out for the yard sale.
You know, Margaret Hoffman had 3 classes of books. One class of books was books I'm going to keep and read. The other class of books are books that can be, you know, sold or put in yard sales or whatever. And a third class, which is the largest class, is books to give to other people. These are specifically people she had in mind. I think I got a few of them.
I did.
Maybe some did others too.
I think we are so possession rich. I have the opposite problem, and that is keeping track of it all. and maintaining it all. And sometimes I like to get rid of some of the stuff. I think I just reflect on that. I think we're unusual in that in the United States at this point, in being middle class in the United States.
Maybe we have John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s problem.
Did you hear that?
Maybe we have John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s problem, with the, hey, money's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Too much of it.
Stuff got downsized 3 times, twice while she was living and once after she died. And some of it is only precious to me because it was hers. Some of it I'm very proud to have, I now have these 2 desks in my house that are really cool, that my grandfather made or redesigned. On the other hand, I have 2 large plastic boxes of framed pictures in my garage. That each one of them is important to me, but they're not important enough to me to find places to hang them up in my house.
I have the same thing.
I suppose someday I will go through and take them out of the frames and put them in something else and get rid of some of the frames. But knowing myself, that's likely to be a long time. How is it that you change what's important in terms of possessions you want to keep?
In terms of process, I have given or asked my children to be in conversation with me when they feel like they should. About driving, about how I go about my life in my house, and so far they haven't had too much to talk about. But Anna has stepped up and said, "Mom, you shouldn't be filling that bird feeder up on that ladder anymore." That kind of thing, and so I'm hoping that they will, and my friends as well, will come to me when they think I should, whatever. I want it to be a conversation, not a you should be. But that's not about possessions, really. Yes.
Driving is, and maybe your bird feeder is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have several friends who have decided to stop driving for good reasons. And it does strike me, given one of mine was modern transportation, that would be a major
It's a big
change in my life.
Yeah.
All of us, I suspect at one time or another, have tried to not preach, but for options to people to be less materially bound. And some of them have been received in good spirit and good terms. On the other hand, most of us have found that we don't necessarily like the process when it applies to ourselves.
Absolutely.
At one point, there was a initiative within Quakers to suggest that we should avoid air travel. And I kind of said, well, unnecessary air travel. Because I consider visiting my relatives in England necessary travel. And sometimes I consider getting to the East Coast or the West Coast necessary travel. So that one didn't take particularly with me. On the other hand, if it gets so expensive I can't afford to do it, that would be a way to change my position on the subject. Sports get more and more uncomfortable. That could possibly change my position on the subject. Talking about detachment and keeping up with stuff in your life, or deciding what is important in your life. Terry? And the question none of us seem to have big answers for is, how do you get people to change their minds about their stuff?
You know, I think that I know that part of my attachment to any number of things in my household has to do with the source of those things. And the connection to that person or even that time in my life when that those things refer to. So, and I actually think about this really quite a lot because there's sort of an open question, are we going to stay in our house or move to someplace that's easier? And if I have to move, obviously not everything I have is going to make the transition, or if I choose to move. But so, okay, so like my recorder that I play all the time, the alto, actually several of them, were my mother's. And that is very important to me to have that connection. It's not just any old recorder, okay? And then there's this table that my grandfather made, and this table, and this table, and this chair that my grandfather made. Does anybody in the world actually care, except for me? Probably not. Maybe my kids would like to have a souvenir of their great-grandfather. And then, you know, all those books that refer to different times in my life also. And some of them that I still have to read. And that refers to a belief that I'm going to read them. Which I don't know, you know, it's like everything takes time. And just dealing with all the things like dishes and laundry takes time. So how to find time to, okay, so here's back to my mother. Somewhere, and this is kind of funny, but kind of pitiful, somewhere in the many boxes, cardboard boxes of papers that I have kept, there is a letter from my mother, and it says, simplify, simplify, simplify. The most valuable thing you have is your time. The more stuff you have, the more time it takes to take care of it. How many tablecloths does anyone need? Anyway, I've kept these boxes of papers in part because I know it's right there. There's that letter. It's not like I really need to see it in person, but I want to see it in person. I put it there to save because it was important. And you know what she would say about that. That's silly.
That idea of the emotional attachment. I mentioned earlier about these old pieces of furniture that have been in my mother's family for at least 200 years probably. And one of them is a table, a drop leaf table that we had been using as our dining room table for a while. And Amberly was, this was about a year ago. So, we were all sitting at the table and Amberly suddenly, she was just kind of staring off into the air and said, "It loves us." And I said, "Well, what did you say, Amberly?" She said, "It loves us. The table loves us." And then she put her head down on the table and says, "I love you too, table." And somehow she got the vibrations, I don't know, the emotions from that. I think that was her way of, as a 2-year-old, articulating that.
That's beautiful.
That's wonderful.
Great.
Okay, I have to say, for me, and this is not true of everybody, I have to say that for me, and this is not necessarily true of everyone, that digital things have simplified my life a great deal. All my books these days, with a couple of exceptions, are all on the Kindle, and I'm carrying my entire library around with me. Now, the question is am I consuming less of the energy resources of the earth by having my books digital or not? I'm not really sure, because obviously these things are stored on enormous server farms that are powered by waterfalls and the growing digital loads that are also drains the planet. But that's hard to measure, it really is that, am I cutting down the trees buying the books, or am I sucking out the energy resources by having my Kindle? But I'm really aware of how different it is for me, because I'm at ease with having accounts and storing passwords somewhere and getting into things and having some good instincts about what to click when. And I know my friends who are certainly have equal intellectual prowess to mine and greater have a lot of trouble with this stuff. It doesn't simplify their life at all. It makes it more difficult, and that's hard to resolve. But for me, I tell my bank, don't send that paper, and I tell everything I can search for and find and then have piling up somewhere. Much simpler. Now, in terms of consumption, I think Liz and I are having less trouble with buying big or expensive things as buying a continuous stream of little crap, boxes and little tools and batteries for gadgets that don't work anymore, and that extra recharging power cable that I need because I don't know where the others are because I've lost them somewhere. And Amazon makes it so easy to just, there it is. And so there's this stream of little crap that we're always ordering. And if we have to change anything, this summer I bought a new guitar. I was, relatively expensive and a big item, probably took some of the Earth's energy resources, but it makes me so happy in a way that still another box of paper clips doesn't. So I think I'm going to focus on buying fewer paper clips than buying fewer guitars.
Okay.
You'd agree with that one. Fewer guitars? Well, I don't buy a new mandolin because I have a friend, who satisfies my need for mandolin music quite well. Thank you.
That's one thing that does strike me. It's a little bit, it's along the same lines, but I've started to think about, I've started to think about who each of the instruments that I do have is going to go to. And several of them are already known and have letters in them. And I guess the reason that I say that is that obviously is a measure of how important those things are to me. And because they need to go where someone else will enjoy them. And one other thing, and we've talked a lot, Melissa talked about it, Terry's talked about it, Liz talked about it, I've talked about it, Howard talked about musical instruments. I have often told people that I don't own these instruments, I'm caretaking them because they're going to be around and do what they do a lot longer than I am, what they are. And that may be a way of making myself feel better about having what I have, but nonetheless, it is somewhat true. They need to be in someone's hands down the road when I'm not here to enjoy them.
When my stepfather knew he was dying, he started finding who the appropriate person to get different things were, including things that had come from his family that he'd never particularly used, These 2 fine bamboo fishing poles go to Lee because Lee's the only person we can think of who fishes with things like that. But that's another thing like moving that puts people in the mode too. Not that you're anticipating your death, but deciding who will have this after you is another.
Two things. One, I think we have enough paper clips in the house for the rest of our lives, Terry. Especially since I'm adamant about not throwing paper clips away just because they got used and maybe a little bit more bent than they should be. But always use plastic paper clips, friends, plastic covered paper clips. Archivists will hate you if you use metal paper clips because they rust. So that's one thing. But paper is really my problem because as much as it's digitized, there is a lot that's just on paper still. And I realized that I needed to write a history of Quakers Uniting in publications, which started in '83. I didn't join until '89, but most of the people who were there in the '90s and 2000s are now, they're doing other things. They didn't all die, but some of them did die. And so somebody needs to make that history, and most of it is not digitized. So, what do you need to keep in order to be faithful to the organizations and things that you have done, so that hopefully people will care about the history of it. So that kind of makes me, I have a whole closet full of material, not the yarn, actually the yarn is somewhere else, but material and paper, basically.
We could get into a whole other conversation on what our closet's full of.
Yeah. There are clothes in that closet. Thank you. Mary.
We've established this is not an easy subject, but is one that all of us spend time and effort thinking on. Unless somebody has a final comment, we're ready to go off recording.